The high-stakes call comes amid reports that Russia asked China for military aid as it intensifies its attacks on Ukraine. China denies such a request was ever made. The Biden administration has warned Beijing there will be consequences if it provides support to Russia. So Nancy Cordes is at the White House with more on all of this. First question, Nancy, what more can you tell us about this phone call?
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Well, we know it's coming up shortly. We don't know how long it's going to last. We know it's their first call since November. The two men have been speaking through intermediaries. Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, earlier this week went to Rome, had an intense 7-hour conversation with his Chinese counterpart. But now this is really the high-stakes call, Presidents Biden and President Xi. And the reason that this call is coming at such a pivotal time is because analysts say that what China does over the next couple of weeks is pivotal. If it gives Russia the financial assistance that Russia's reportedly seeking, and there are reports that Russia's been asking for everything from surface-to-air missiles to drones to MREs for troops in Ukraine and armored vehicles and on and on. If China goes ahead and helps Russia, that extends this war that much longer. On the other hand, if China, one of these key allies of Russia, says, actually, no, we're closing our purse, we're not going to help you out at all, it's possible that that could break the resolve of even more officials in Russia. And so all eyes are going to be on this call and whether President Biden can leverage this years-long relationship that he has had with President Xi. They have met in person a number of times back when President Biden was vice president. They have a relationship. And so everybody's going to be watching to see whether he's able to leverage that longtime relationship to convince Xi not only not to help Russia, but to also go ahead and condemn it.
Right, indeed, which Russia or rather China has not done yet. They will not call this an invasion. They will not call it a war. And, you talk about the bond that Xi Jinping has with President Biden. There's a tremendous bond between Xi and Putin. And you recall, Nancy, right before the Olympics, the two men stood side by side and sort of swore their allegiance to each other. And one of the things that binds them is their dislike, aversion to the West telling them what to do. And here we have President Biden about to have this phone call with Xi Jinping.
Right. That is all true. At the time, over the Olympics, they released this 5,000-word statement that said there are no limits to their relationship. Even more recently, Chinese officials have said that the relationship with Russia is rock steady. Compare that to what you're hearing from most of the rest of the world, countries that are, falling over themselves to condemn what Russia is doing. But it's not just this a common bond in sort of taking on the West that has tied them together. They have a 2,600-mile border. It is the 6th longest border in the world, Anne-Marie. China is Russia's #1 trading partner. It buys its coal. It buys its wheat. We interviewed Gary Locke yesterday. He is a former U.S. ambassador to China, and he said China's really in a bond here because on one hand, Chinese citizens are starting to see these images on their own televisions. They see the horrors of what Russia is inflicting upon Ukraine. It's not a secret. But on the other hand, China has this incredible interest in maintaining a relationship with its neighbor. And so everyone is really waiting and watching to see whether China finally does pick a side and what that side's going to be.
Yeah, China's been walking certainly a fine line. I know the Chinese ambassador to Ukraine met with his counterpart in Ukraine and pledged money to help rebuild Ukraine afterwards and some semblance of support. But at the end of the day, requests are granted more easily if there's a consequence. So what could the possible consequence be? What could the threat be to China?
Right. Well, White House officials have been using very ominous language. They are saying that China could face severe consequences if it helps Russia. They haven't always elaborated on exactly what those consequences would be. One thing we do know is that the U.S. and many of its allies in Europe have threatened that if China tries to help Russia evade the sanctions that the West has placed upon it, particularly if China tries to sort of fill the gap and provide Russia with the kinds of technologies that are currently being denied by the U.S. and Europe, that could lead to China itself being sanctioned. So Chinese officials are well aware that they could face their own sanctions if they help Russia. And this all comes at a difficult time for the Chinese economy that has faltered a bit in the wake of COVID shutdowns over the past couple of years. We've obviously reported extensively on supply chain challenges that in many cases originate with Chinese factories. So this is something that China is weighing heavily as it decides whether it's going to help Russia. Yes, they do have a strong trading relationship, but China has an even bigger trading relationship with the West, with Europe. But, you know, it's important to note that the West needs China, too. We need their goods, and China is aware of that as well.
I cannot wait for the update on how that phone call went. Nancy, thank you very much.
You're welcome.